in the business and listening to the story that we've got to share with you today. So I'm going to speak about creating a circular economy in the wind industry and our journey so far. But first of all, I'm just going to tell you a little bit about Renewable Parts and the background of the business. So this is the business's 10th year, 10th birthday this year, and it was founded by a local gentleman to Lochilphead called Ewan Anderson. The business was originally called Recycled Renewables, and it was a company repairing and refurbishing parts for wind turbines to begin with. As the business grew, and it grew very quickly, a logistics centre was opened in Renfrew to be closer to the central belt, since Lochilphead isn't exactly the easiest place in the world to access. So the business grew very quickly over the first few years. When I started with the business 3 years ago, I think there was around 10 people, and now there's 30. I think that'll probably be double again within the next couple of years. Like I say, the business started in Lochilphead, grew in Renfrew, and then 3 years ago when I joined the business, the refurbishment centre was opened back in Lochilphead again. So before I move on to specifically the refurbishment centre, it's just important to point out that it's not just the refurbishment centre part of the business that's focusing on the circular economy and carbon footprint of our customers. The rest of the business is doing hard work in these areas as well. The business does sell fully refurbished OEM-backed turbines, and also constantly strives to green the supply chain for our customers. So that's always going on in the background, in addition to the work that's carried out at the refurbishment centre itself. So on to the refurbishment centre. So like I say, we're based in Lochilphead. There's a small but fast growing team up in the refurbishment centre here. And I'm just going to talk to you about what's been going on over the last 3 years as we've grown. So in the refurbishment centre itself, when I joined, there were only 2 of us here 3 years ago. There's 10 now, with another 3 to join within the next 3 or 4 weeks. We started out repairing and refurbishing parts. We very quickly dropped the word repair because it muddies the water, so to speak. We only refurbish parts, so any part that comes from the refurbishment centre is fully refurbished. It'll have a standard scope of work and a standard bill of materials, so it's clear to the customer what they're getting back. So they're not giving us something that we're repairing a specific component and returning to them. We're selling fully refurbished items off the shelf with a part exchange system set up. So there were a few options or a few reasons for people to buy refurbished product when I joined the business. So first and foremost was always price and lead time. Most of the customers would have an idea of what they would pay for a refurbished item. There was a figure of 60% of the value of new would be fairly widespread across the industry. Everybody had this figure. That was, I think, what most businesses would deem to be an acceptable level of risk. So they would get something that's 40% cheaper than new, but there's a bit of risk involved. Lead time as well. Quite often the products we had on the shelf were obviously available straight away, or we could turn them around fairly quick. We'd maybe have the component parts available, where sometimes, especially in this industry, the lead times can be up to 6 months for certain parts, and when turbines are offline, they can lose a lot of revenue every day. So the price and lead time was by far and away the priority for most of the customers when I started. The idea that the refurbished parts should be functionally as good as new, that remains. In some cases we've improved on new in some ways, maybe just in very small areas. It might be that we've improved the packaging that allows the product to arrive with less likelihood of being damaged in transit. We also have a lot more support for the customers if we're selling refurbished goods, because we would help to gather the data of the failed components, and we can help to feed back to the customer about what's failed and possibly if there's anything they should be doing differently, or any potential improvements that could be made to the product. But finally, and where we've seen the biggest change is where customers want to reuse what they have. So this is all about circular economy, cutting waste. We've got a lot of customers who are big utilities companies. They're in a green industry. They're perceived to be very green businesses. And certainly over the last 18 months, there's possibly more of a spotlight shone on them. And there's been a huge switch and a drive to buy refurbished product and recirculate product in the market. It's been a notable shift. We've had customers who have had their own internal targets change from buying 10% new product in a year to 50%. In some cases, we even have some products where we're selling the refurbished component for more than the new OEM price, and that's down to the environmental departments within these businesses having more say and more discussion with procurement about how much stuff they want to recirculate. I think this diagram, most people here are likely to have seen this in one form or another, especially over the last year. There's been a real push to the circular economy, so apologies if it's going over old ground. I think this is something we use a lot when we're having discussions with our customers. The most important part of this diagram, we feel, is that to point out that although recycling is undoubtedly a good thing, it's the second worst option after landfill. So recycling's got the second largest carbon footprint. Where we see ourselves is in the refurbishment or remanufacture areas, so the second two loops. As these loops get smaller, the carbon emissions get smaller. So obviously, from an environmental point of view, the preferred option is to repair at site. But at scale, when you've got farms of several hundred turbines, sometimes that's not feasible. So we see ourselves as the first good option for recirculating parts after the option of repairing at site. So looking at the actual process of creating the circular economy in the wind industry, I mean, there's been a lot of factors at play, and we certainly haven't done it single-handedly, but we can share with you the story that we have. So we very quickly stopped using the word repair. We had a few customers who were really struggling with the idea. They were still, arriving with broken parts and asking us to fix them until very recently. But the way it works is that we sell refurbished products off the shelf where possible, and then we raise a zero value purchase order for the old parts coming back, the old goods coming back. So similar to a service exchange for an alternator, a starter motor in a car, although we don't put a value in the old goods coming back. And the reason for that, we tried a number of ways of ensuring old parts come back to feed the stock and feed the loop. If we were to put a value on those, or to say in some circumstances this part's not good enough to return, we then end up in a situation where the customer might not have any other old parts they can send us, so we end up completely stuck. Their only option is to buy new. So in order to set up a scalable loop and a circular economy, we felt that the only way to do that was for us to assess every component that we're going to refurbish and take into account what failures we expect to see, varying conditions, and then set a refurbished price which takes into account that risk. So what we're doing then is we're setting a completely set price for the customer for a refurbished component, and it's regardless of the condition of what they send us, as long as they send a unit. Now that does put quite a lot of risk in our court, but it's calculated risk and it's manageable. And the way we see it is we would review any new refurbishment loop after 6 months or after so many components to make sure that the risk we have taken into account is accurate. Sorry, the bin lorry's just gone past here, and hope you can't hear it reversing in the background. So the way that works, we've tried to make it as simple as possible. The biggest challenge and one of the biggest enablers for the circular economy is reverse logistics, and certainly that's been our biggest challenge in setting up the circular economy. What tends to happen is we deal with procurement departments, so we're selling to people that we were dealing with before we ever did refurbished components. We're selling to procurement department. They like to have just a part that they can order, which is a direct equivalent to the new. But the issue is that that person's not then responsible for returning the old unit. So we have created a job for somebody within that business who didn't have to do that before. So it's certainly not going to be the procurement department are going to be packaging up to return old goods or cleaning them, making sure they're suitable for transport. So it's likely to end up with an engineer or site technician to do that job. Again, this is something they didn't have to do 2 years ago. These are all parts that would have been going in skips or bins or possibly into quarantine. So in order to make sure we're not putting anybody out and getting anyone's back up, we've tried to make it as simple a process as possible. So the parts that we sell refurbished, we have custom made frames, boxes, bespoke packaging that is a tight fit for these parts. So the likes of in this image, you can see a set of 8 gearboxes. These go in sets of 8 in this turbine type. We've made frames that are liftable both with a forklift but also with a lifting eye in the middle that a crane can lift. We've got a trailer that belongs to the business that has a 1-ton crane on it, which means we can then deliver these direct to site. So in some cases the sites don't have any lifting equipment, they've got no forklifts, and that was one of the other big obstacles, was that the only way of uplifting was to have a courier who had a tailgate and also a means of getting these components across gravel in a lot of cases. So we've made that as simple as possible. Some of the other components, the electrical components or small pumps and motors, we've made wooden boxes that are a very tight fit around the component, which hold it in place so that there's no paper or plastic packaging needed then to pack out the box. And they would be sent with a bag inside the box so that the old part, which is likely to be dirty or oily, can just be put straight into a bag, cable tied, put back in the box, and the gears could be put back in the frames, and then we can just simply arrange uplift and send labels to the customer. So as far as the site technician is concerned, this should be as easy, if not easier, than it was before. So the likes of the frames that we make, they can drop these gears directly from the turbine into the frames and have them ready to uplift. The boxes should also make it easier to stack old components, where beforehand, if there were, odd shapes and sizes, they could be, quite a hazard in the workshop. So in that respect, we've made it as simple as possible. We speak with all the customers as well about the process. We ask that when they return goods that they fill out forms that's got as much information as possible on it as well, so we can gather that information for the customer. So as far as the actual process is concerned, when we see a new product, as I say, we never quote to repair, we quote to refurbish. So we take into account, first of all, what we think could go wrong. So not necessarily what's wrong with the unit we're looking at the time, but what else we think could go wrong. We are then also having to make a business case for that product. So first of all, there's the engineering case and seeing if it's physically possible to refurbish that component. Then we have to put a business case together and move that through internally here to make sure that it's worth doing. If that is the case and we've seen a product through more than once or twice, we would then be putting together a bill of materials and a standard scope of work for the workshop staff to work through when they refurbish the component. The workshop staff are all trained. Where possible, they're trained by the OEM, so it might be that in some cases, if you've got a particularly friendly OEM, they might show you how to work on that component. It's not always the case. Sometimes we have to just do internal training, and it's based on what we've seen fail in the past and what to look out for. As far as traceability is concerned, this is really important for us. We serialise everything that comes through the workshop, so whether it's been serialised before or not, it will certainly be generated a serial number when it arrives. That allows us to track the component through the work process and see who's done at each stage of the work. But it also means when that component's sold and away to the customer, if we ever have a warranty claim, we can come back and not only see what happened in the process when the part was with us, but we can also trace that right back and see the first time that part came in, what had failed, who did it come from, what were the wind conditions on the day, a number of factors. So we ask the customer to give us as much detail as possible, and that allows full traceability of the component. As far as research is concerned, we've got a number of industrial and academic partners. I believe someone from Angus 3D's here. We've got a number, I'm not going to name drop every company, but we've got a number of both academic and industrial partners. We use various departments of the University of Strathclyde and also Trinity College in Dublin. So we're using a lot of partners because it's difficult for a small business or a business our size to have a big R&D department. It's more about, you know, commercialising and productionising the parts we're doing. So if there's a part we've never seen before, if there's any doubt about how a repair or a refurbishment would work, we would maybe ask one of these partners to, you know, do a more thorough investigation. I think it works well for both parties. I think in the case of academic institutions, they like dealing with a small business because a project can be seen through from start to finish much quicker. They can get decisions made much quicker. For us, we've found it quite refreshing working with even the bigger academic institutions, how flexible the projects are, because for us the goalposts can move month to month. You know, a 1-year project by the time you're finished could be a complete waste of time if there wasn't an option to, you know, vary what you're trying to get out of that project. So what we see here is a gearbox planetary carrier, for example, and it's something we had a lot of trouble getting replacement parts. So this is a part that has a very high failure rate. The OEM doesn't really want to supply this part. They don't want to see these gearboxes refurbished. We have had a lot of trouble with lead times and pricing on this particular product. So in this case, this is one that we reverse engineered to set up a UK-based manufacturer so that we don't, it's not maybe quite so much about the price and lead time, but more about the continuity of supply. So there was always this worry that, you know, if the OEM just shut down the supply completely, that we could not continue to supply this product refurbished. So as far as capability is concerned, so I think there's no product that we wouldn't look at. I think if it's very, very low value, it's difficult to justify setting up a refurbishment process. We have over 50 products, I think, in the range that's growing all the time. We refurbish products for most turbine types. Certainly most of the turbine types in the UK we would refurbish components for. Where the components aren't refurbished in-house, there might be specialist electrical or electronic components. We would sub that out to third-party trusted suppliers. We have an audit process that we go through with those suppliers that ensures that they work to the same standard that we expect, so that we can then put our name in that product. And in most cases, these third-party suppliers aren't necessarily in the wind industry, so this is a route in for them, and we kind of become an agent for those suppliers. We've got a number of very strong relationships with some of the OEMs for component products in the turbines as well. As I say, we've got a number of partnerships. Highlands and Island Enterprise have been a huge supporter of ours. We've had, in addition to grant funding and support, we've had a number of various other types of training and so on over the last 3 or 4 years. We're also heavily involved with, like I say, various departments of the University of Strathclyde. So I'll see if I get all these initials right: the FRC, DMEM, AMRL. I think all of them got abbreviations and it can be quite hard to remember them all, but every department has their own approach, and it's been, you know, really a delight working with them. I think the most important partnership, though, we found has been with the customers. We haven't really, with the rest of the business, with new part supply, it's very much a straightforward customer-supplier relationship. But for the refurbishment centre, we very much see the customers as partners. We're all working to the same goal. We're all wanting to, you know, cut waste. We're all wanting to cut down time on turbines. So it's in everybody's interest that they share as much information as they can with us. It means we've got a very good working relationship. We can remedy, you know, even issues with fitting if we feel that, you know, something's not going well, or if we're seeing parts coming back. So we've got a very close relationship with all the customers who've bought into the circular economy idea. I think this is one of the last slides. So the reason I put this in, leading by example, is that we need to be seen to be practicing what we preach. Obviously, in our sales pitch to customers, when it comes to refurbished goods, there's a heavy emphasis on cutting carbon footprint and cutting waste. So we need to be seen to be doing that ourselves. So to that end, there are 2 or 3 of us within the business who have taken on our Green Champions training, which I believe was organised by Zero Waste Scotland and Glasgow Chamber of Commerce, I think. We monitor our electricity consumption, we monitor our water usage, but we're also able to monitor the volume of material that is diverted from landfill and scrap each month by customer and by product type, and we can report that back to the customer. So for some of those customers, this is a real bonus for them, because the person we're dealing with might be in an environmental department, and they can then just have a monthly graph that shows exactly how much scrap has been avoided and therefore CO2 avoidance. So it's a fairly basic way of tracking these volumes. We do just take the weight of that product in steel and say, well, if that was made new, this is what the carbon equivalent would be to produce that much steel. But it's fairly accurate. We're normally quite conservative with our assumptions, and I think in the last year we've diverted about 50 tonnes of steel from scrap, and therefore around about 90 tonnes of CO2 for our customers. And then finally, just to touch on this, we're really pleased last year to pick up an award at the CeeD Awards. It was a really enjoyable evening as well. It was myself that attended that. It was a great night. We've been very lucky and in the right place at the right time in being in the renewables industry, but also doing circular economy. I think there's a huge focus on those areas at the moment. So I think we've been developing a relationship with the likes of Zero Waste Scotland, and we've also picked up a number of awards and recognitions over the last 3 years. In fact, I think Ethan in the workshop, who's our graduate apprentice, is up for an award tonight at this year's Young Professionals Green Energy Award. So I hope he does all right with that. But I think that's a summary of where we're at now. I'm quite happy to answer any or all questions that are coming, and thanks for your time.
That's fantastic. Thanks, Michael. I guess we'll wait. Joe's put a couple of questions in, but I have one just straight off the bat. Talking to some of our member companies, a lot of I suppose the biggest stumbling block that they face is this almost creating value in something like circular economy or refurbing. Something that reduces carbon usually has at least a short-term cost implication for a manufacturer. How do you get around this, or how have you got around it, or did you find it didn't add cost to your process?
I don't think it really added much in the way of cost. I mean, I think we tried to add value to the product. So functionally, we tried to put the products back as good as new. So we would put a warranty which is similar to that of new for any product. So functionally, we would expect the product to be as good as new. Where there are maybe some sacrifices made would be possibly in the cosmetics, whether the paint job the second time round might not be quite the same, but it's all about what the customer's really wanting. And I think if that's the only sacrifice, if you're going to save half a day's work by not having quite the same paint finish on the product, that might be the only difference between making the refurbishment feasible or not. So I think in most cases the customers more driven to cut waste than they are to they'd rather see the product recirculated. I think, and I think the other thing that's really got it over the line is the reverse logistics. I think that was a real challenge for us to begin with. The bespoke packaging, we're trying to do that for all the products. I mean, we feel that most of the refurbished products that we sell are in better packaging than the new products, and it's reusable packaging as well. So.
Okay, so I have a few questions on that, but I want to give other people a chance. So we've got a question here from Mark Bull, and he asks, how do you achieve refurbished parts with respect to deeming them as OEM approved? Is there original manufacturer certification or inspection?
So most of our refurbished components are not OEM approved. So we do have, out with the refurbishment centre, the business does sell fully refurbished wind turbines, which are OEM approved, but they are actually refurbished by the OEM. We have 1 or 2 refurbishment programs specifically for fairly big offshore customers where the OEM's been involved. The OEM, and when I say the OEM, I don't mean the turbine manufacturer, I mean the manufacturer of the component part, has been involved in setting up the refurbishment process and approving, you know, what's good to be reused and what's acceptable tolerances. So it's all calculated on a product by product basis. It really depends, you know, which product we're doing, who the customer is and who the OEM is. Certainly some of the OEMs have been really quite tricky to deal with. It's obviously the choice for the customer is, do we buy a new one or do we buy a refurbished one? So if they are buying refurbished, then we are taking something away from the OEM in that respect.
Yeah, and I guess that's something you have to constantly work to make sure you stay on the right side of that relationship. Joe's question, just going back to the first question, and then I'll catch up with others. Joe asked, is there a difference between onshore and offshore in terms of processes for refurb?
Certainly, I think the offshore equipment, generally the physical size and weight of the components is much higher. Also, generally the service companies that are dealing with offshore turbines are likely to be larger service companies with more stringent checks. You know, so in setting up refurbishment loops for offshore, we've certainly had to enter into much larger framework agreements, higher volumes of products, more thorough audits. But it's certainly the actual process itself. No, I think we would generally create a scope of work for any product that we feel is a thorough refurbishment, regardless of the input from the outside, I think.
Okay. I'll read the other questions, but I just want to invite the audience. If you've got a question, feel free to put up your hand and you can ask Michael directly. Lucy Stanfield asks Michael. She says, if you perhaps have any plans to extend outside of the wind industry, and or if you get interest from other energy providers.
Yeah, so we have. It has come up actually once or twice. I mean, I think we have to be careful because we're managing rapid growth at the moment. Certainly the refurbishment part of the business has doubled in size every year for the last 3 years, and it's looking like it's going to double again. And I think we have to manage our own expectations. There has been inquiries from adjacent industries, but it's whether we continue on the road we're going. I think, you know, a number of the components, calipers, reduction gearboxes, are not exclusive to the wind industry, so, you know, they would have crossover into other industries. I think the way we're going at the moment, we're really concentrating on productionising a handful of components that we're seeing really high volumes of at the moment, and they're good value components. So we're just about to move into a new premises within the next week or two, and that new premises is 4 times the size of where we are, and it's very much going to separate out our R&D area from production area, and it's going to allow us to have overhead tracks for, you know, the actual production process, the undercoating, the spray and the packing. And I think when we get to that point and we've got the two areas separated out, then possibly the R&D can start looking at you know, adjacent industries. But at the moment, I think we're just kind of trying to meet demand.
Well, I'll play devil's advocate then, and if there's any other manufacturers listening, there's a little bit of opportunity there to jump into adjacent markets and see what's available. Lucy actually had a second question. She said, are there any key areas of research you think are missing at the moment?
I think so. We've got a number of studies ongoing with the University of Strathclyde. We've got one project at the moment looking at barriers to adoption of the circular economy in the industry. I think there'll be a lot of useful information to take out of that, because we're speaking to various stakeholders right across the industry to see what reasons they would have to not adopt refurbished components. It can be quite a tricky one to highlight what else needs to be done. I think there's certainly legislation would help as well to encourage more people to you know, maybe have a certain targets for the amount of stuff that has to be recirculated, or you know, if the new price and the refurbished price are almost like for like, the onus should be on them to try and reuse as much as possible. But yeah, there's a lot going on. I think in the run up to COP26 as well, it's really put a real light on everybody and everybody's green credentials. So I think there'll be a lot going on over the next few months in that respect.
Yeah, I mean, it's good to see the tide seems to have turned very definitely. So I think you showed really good foresight, I guess, to break into that market when you did. Mark Bull, who asked the first question, has come back and he said, thanks for answering his question. Off the back of your answer, you commented that your refurbed products are like new. Are you able to match your refurbished product warranties with new product warranties? Yeah,
I think all the refurbished products, unless if it's a specific electrical or electronic component where it's subbed out to a specialist and they might, you know, not give us a warranty that matches that of new, but pretty much everything else is put out with a warranty that matches the new warranty.
Excellent. Thanks for that. So I'll go back to one of my questions, because again, it's one of these kind of headline worries that a lot of people have. You mentioned with your reverse logistics that you're creating and almost manufacturing the packaging for your products. Who keeps that packaging? Is it you or is it your clients? Because obviously it's quite large, it must take up space, and there's a cost involved in just keeping the packaging material available.
So we physically make or have made the frames for the gearboxes, and in-house we've actually just made the boxes ourselves in the workshop to go with some of the products. Generally, we're looking at producing twice as many as we think we'll need, so that the customers can keep, you know, one set of frames or, you know, one box of each product with them, so that they're not necessarily, that allows them to hold stock of refurbished products rather than just buy one, put the old one in the box and return it. So it depends on the product type, whether we would make enough that the customers can also have them. We set these products up at zero value in our system so that we can track them. So all the likes of the frames are all serialized as well. So for example, if we sold a set of 8 gearboxes, the gearboxes are all serialized on the sales order, but so are the 2 frames. And that way we can see which customers got the frames and track them, come back in.
Okay, that's actually brilliant. We've got another question here from Mario Andrade, who generalizes the questions a little bit, so you don't feel like you've been grilled, Michael. He says, what was your main challenge, pain point really, in developing this business?
Well, certainly I've only really been involved in the refurbishment part of the business, and I think I came in at a very good time because the business was growing and demand was already there for refurbished components. I think the switch from using the word repair and just eliminating that altogether and only using the word refurbished. When we went from assessing what came in and saying this is what it's going to cost to the customer, and making the decision to say, well, we are going to take the risk and we're just going to have to look at every product and decide how much it's going to cost. In the early days, that was a real challenge, because some products that we've been doing for a while, we then set a price and we took in the old ones regardless of condition, and in some cases we would end up seeing some products we were making a loss on 5 or 6 occasions, but it was really a case of holding our nerve and keeping an eye on the average cost to us. And thankfully I can say that there's not many products where we've had to change the refurbished sale price. Sometimes it can be quite nerve-wracking doing it this way, because like I say, if you came across a new customer who's going to buy this product, it might be that they've got a dozen old units that are in very, very bad condition sitting aside as their feedstock when they start buying from you. So it could be that you get, you know, a dozen units in a row that are loss making, but as long as you're always watching the average cost per unit when we're working on the system to do the assemblies, we can mitigate that.
It's certainly an interesting business model, I have to say. I always, when I hear something like this, it reminds me of the Rolls-Royce. They have that power by the hour, where they don't actually sell the engine, they just sell the use of the engine and maintain it. So that model seems to work very well in a circular economy framework, and I guess it's something that just needs to be expanded. But it does mean you have to educate your customer. And I guess, did you have kind of stumbling blocks with that, or have you found that people have just adopted that very easily? Do they understand the concept?
We had 1 or 2 stumbling blocks. I won't name them, but we had 1 or 2 stumbling blocks. We had, most customers were very agreeable to it. You know, they were sending us products that they'd had problems with for years prior to this. And now suddenly the products were a bit cheaper because they were buying refurbished, but they were also getting feedback about what's failed, and then that allowed them to engage, and they wanted to talk a bit more about it. And they were, you know, and in some cases they'd maybe get in touch and say, well, what can we do better when we're removing the product from the turbine? We've had a few items that have come back that have made it down from the turbine the quick way, which doesn't help when you try to refurbish it at the other end because it's broken to pieces. But we've had really good constructive conversations with customers, and it's the result of those conversations that is the products that you see now. It's all been born out of agreements and, you know, investigations across companies.
And that's the thing we haven't even touched on really, is that the data collection and management that you mapping with that part, because obviously you're building up a huge wealth of knowledge really. Are you finding, I mean, you've just said obviously that's helpful to your customers. Is it changing anything in the way that you're refurbing in your business model as you get more and more information?
Yeah, I think it is. I mean, there's a lot of data in our system now, and it's what you do with it. It's important, but we're in a really good position because, you know, we've got customers who are, you know, say we've got 4 or 5 utilities companies, customers who have got the same turbine type. Under no other circumstance would they be able to benefit from any other company's data. Whereas with us supplying all 5 companies, and they're happy to share the data with us, we can set up projects where we can then, you know, instead of having 20 turbines worth of parts to look at, we've got 100 turbines worth of parts, so we can spot the trends quicker. And we can report back and say, you know, if the turbine's in this position in the wind farm, if it's a part that's in this position within the turbine, that's the part that's most likely to fail first. So, you know, we've had really good response as far as that's concerned. The engineering departments of most of the big utilities and service companies have been really quite engaged. They've come to the workshop a number of times, and we've set up a few trials with improvements as well. I mean, again, I didn't think 2 years ago we'd be in a position where we've got, you know, big utilities companies allowing us to try products in their turbines, but they're really keen. So.
Well, I think that's testament to the reputation you've built up, to be honest. That's the end of the questions. Here we go. Joe, why don't you ask the question, or what were you saying? Oh, the prognostics area. So that's something I don't know much about. Joe, I don't know if you want to elaborate there.
No, I'm just saying it's an area I looked at before when I worked over at Heriot Watt, the kind of prognostics. A lot of the utilities were looking at that. So you just said it, working out failure before it happens is a critical part of efficiency gain. So probably got my mic in the wrong place. So you know, it's a useful thing to do, and probably an area of the business that you could capitalise on, I think, you know, going forward. If you need any help, I can certainly connect you to some experts in that area, if that helps you.
Yeah, excellent, thanks.
Abdul, you put your hand up. Feel free to ask Michael a question.
Thank you very much, Michael, for that. I work for the Manufacturing Skills Academy of NMIS, and we develop content for people to develop skills. But my main question was, I know with refurbishing and remanufacturing, it's quite a big challenge. And do you have challenges in hiring the right staff to meet your demand? I know you're increasing, you were saying it's doubling every year. Do people have the right skills, or what do we need to do nationally to help you?
It's quite appropriate that you're asking the question, actually, Abdul, because we've actually taken on 3 people through NMIS in the last week. We put out 3 job offers last week in that new programme. It is a challenge. I think I studied manufacturing, engineering and management a lifetime ago, and I've certainly found that it's completely different to what I'm experiencing now. I think manufacture's one course type, but remanufacture or reverse engineering or refurbishment is completely different, because it's like manufacture but without knowing at all what your raw materials are going to be. So every day a pallet's turning up and you've got no idea what's going to be inside, and you've got to then do something with it. And also everything that turns up at the door has been deemed unserviceable by someone technical. So, you know, a site technician, an engineer, somewhere along the line someone said we can't reuse that, or, you know, it's broken, it's beyond repair. So we are then putting together a team of people in the workshop who are taking that and, you know, somehow giving it a new lease of life. So it's a big challenge. We've got one of our apprentices, Ethan, who I was saying is up for an award tonight. He's going to be our first remanufacturing engineer. So he's starting a graduate apprenticeship with the University of Strathclyde, and the course title is Design and Engineering Manufacture. But I think the final 2 years of the course, we're going to tailor it towards reverse engineering, additive manufacture, and all the kind of skills and areas you need for refurbishing components. The other challenge we do have is the area. I mean, I think, like I said before, Lochgilphead's, well, Argyle's a lovely looking place, but it's quite a tricky place to attract people to, especially kind of young folk. So that can be quite a challenge as well, to get people up into the area. But we certainly employ more on attitude than skills. I think the skills can be taught, but most of the people that have joined the team have joined from out with the wind industry and they've just been trained up.
But that's the sign of a true engineer, isn't it? It's making something work even when everyone else says it can't. So I think you guys are living on that little razor blade edge every day.
Yeah.
That's great. So I don't see any more questions. I don't know if I'm missing something, but I think we've got through everything. Last opportunity, really, anyone in the audience, if you've got anything else you'd like to ask Michael, we've got a couple more minutes.
Lauren, just a follow-up, a wee job for you. Michael, if you don't know the guys at Woodward, Lauren knows them, they're lovely, you should go and talk to them. They do exactly what you do, but for fuel systems for aircraft. So Andy and the guys down there are great. So I'm sure you'd have a good COVID-free, masked up time to wander the workshop, and vice versa. Definitely what CeeD do. So I'm sure Lauren can organise that for you.
Excellent, that sounds great. Excellent, thanks very much.
Perfect. I think that's all then. I'm happy to wrap up. I think we've honestly covered this in a really good way, Michael, and it's obvious to me why you guys have won so many awards. I think you are showing the way forward, really for a lot of different manufacturers. So it's just such an inspiring story. And hopefully you'll have encouraged a few others to at least think about what they can do in terms of lowering carbon emissions. I know I heard on the radio yesterday, and they said the government's net zero journey is just that, it's net nothing, because so little has been done. So so honestly encouraging that that some companies are making the difference. So that's it then. I'm not going to babble on. Thanks again for your time, Michael, and thanks once again to everyone in the audience for joining us today. And as I say, if you have any questions, feel free to get in touch.